Diego, Captain Mark East Vidomi, Federal Fire Chief Mary Anderson, Captain Timothy Borelli, Coast Guard Sector San Diego, and Mr. Jason Golomsky Jones, Navy Region Southwest Fleet Environmental Director. At this time, we're almost over.
Yes, good afternoon. It's great to be here, and thank you for coming. Took us 4 days, and look at the clock now, and too many hours to finally say that we've extinguished all known fires on board USS Bonhomme Richard. Amazing over the last 24 hours of what has transpired as far as getting to a point of degrees as high, or degree temperatures as high as 1,200 degrees, coming down to as low as 125 degrees as we went through the ship. The bottom line is every sailor is a firefighter, and that we certainly have proved that. Hundreds of sailors from more than 20 San Diego-based warships came together in this time of crisis. We had sailors supporting in the air, in the ship, and on the pier. The ship's commanding officer, executive officer, command mast chief, and all command leadership remain on station and are following up support and firefighting efforts. For sailors, the bottom line is their ship is their home. It's a workplace, it's an eating place, and when we go to sea, it's the most lethal thing on the earth. We saw that this week in San Diego Harbor as they were in combat. Now I want to tell you a few brave sailor stories, if I can, that just kind of highlight the resiliency and the incredible fortitude of a United States Navy sailor. DC-2 Jeffrey Garvin from Belmont, Michigan. He served in the Navy for 4 years. He was a first responder as the fire marshal when the first report of black smoke was announced. He went rushing to the fire. Since then, he's been on every site and every day, to include 2 explosions. First explosion, he had to go to the hospital, get treated, concussion protocols, was fit for duty, went back, and when the secondary explosion happened, the same thing basically happened. Again, went through concussion protocols, came back. We did not allow him to go back in for a 3rd time, since he seemed to be a guy that went, and we didn't want any more explosions on the ship. But he's been supporting firefighting efforts since day one. That's the United States Navy sailor. Lieutenant J.G. Bernardo Tinoco from Dallas, Texas, has served in the Navy for 16 years. He led multiple teams on board Bonhomme Richard on recon missions to set safe and stable routes for our firefighting teams to safely navigate through the ship. Additionally, he led a team to extract a sailor in need of medical attention and safely remove him from the ship and render medical attention. These are just a few of the stories. As I was walking in and out of the pier every single day, almost every single hour over the last 4 days, I've witnessed your sons and daughters rushing to the flames, putting the flames out, and securing their ship. We didn't do it alone. It's a team effort. And certainly to the left and right are examples of those teammates. But it's a community effort. So I want to thank everyone in the San Diego region for all your support, your thoughts, your prayers. As we move into the next phase for this warship, I want you to know that we are a proud Navy family, both in uniform and out. And so on behalf of all of the sailors, the captain, and the crew of USS Bonhomme Richard, we want to thank you for your support, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
My question is about, there's been some photos posted online of the damage inside the ship and to the top of the island. Can you describe what we're seeing in those photos? And can you talk a little bit about the survivability of the ship after sustaining that type of damage?
Yeah, the survivability of the ship is there. I mean, it's survivable. It's proven it's survivable. It's in stable condition all the way through. The superstructure that you see that's bent at a roughly 45 degree angle. It's aluminum. It's a softer metal, and so you saw the remnants of what high heat does to aluminum. The deck underneath is secure, and so there are no issues. Obviously, now that things are starting to cool off, we can go and actually assess what is, and what the real issues are. Obviously, you can see sort of mangled metal, aluminum, and so we'll assess that. As far as the remainder of the ship, again, the flames are out, but the heat is still there. So we're going space by space as I speak to every compartment, checking for hot spots, and then putting those hot spots, cooling them either by ventilation or by water, and just kind of marching through every single space, every single deck, to make sure that, again, we can then say officially the fire is out. And that's just protocol for firefighting.
Yes, you said survivable. Does that mean that you believe that the ship will be repaired?
Again, we'll make, the ship can be repaired. Whether or not it will be repaired will be determined.
And can you tell me also about the challenges that still lie ahead right now?
Well, I think visibly you can see one of the challenges, probably other than fire, the next tough thing to deal with is a free surface effect. In other words, when water can go from either side of the ship, from port or starboard, and it has free reign, if you will, along the deck. And that brings obviously challenges to how the ship tends. And so overnight we saw that we had a starboard list, and now visibly you can see a port list. And so as we were, cooling down the decks and get everything cool, the water was held up in one part of the ship, and then we saw that free surface effect happen, and so the ship tended a couple degrees on the port side, the left-hand side. So the good thing about that is we knew we had free surface effect, and now we can control it by dewatering. And that's what we're in the progress of doing right now. So the ship is stable the way she's sitting. She has been stable the entire time, and she rests very comfortably.
So I asked the Navy about the number of fires they've had over the last decade, and from what I was told, of the last 9 fires over the last 10 years, 7 of those fires have been aboard ships that were docked. Most of those were undergoing maintenance. You mentioned the parents of the sailors on board the ship. What can you do to reassure parents that a ship is safe when it's undergoing maintenance?
I think the big thing, thank you for your question, the big thing is to, again, understand the training that's required, and then the vulnerabilities within a shipyard environment. And so in this case, we had great teammates that were in support of us within moments of the report of black smoke. In this case, the fire got out of control, and then an explosion happened, and so they had to react to that. As far as dealing with shipyard environments, it really comes back to the tried and true training that we do. And so again, of the countless thousands of maintenance availabilities that we do, I would say over the last 10 years, you're going to have areas where errors exist. We've addressed each of those errors each one of those times, and we've learned those lessons, both either from human error or from equipment failure that causes that. But I can assure you that the time and energy spent on safety of the crew, safety of training, safety of, if you go into a shipyard environment, the first sign you see is safety always, and that's really the paramount message.
When was the last time this crew was able to drill for fire on that ship?
I don't have that answer exactly when, but it would be recently, yes, sir. And that's required periodic training that we do on a period basis to make sure we have the reps and sets and the ability. I think you saw that, especially in the DC-2's example. He's the fire marshal, so he was basically the chief of the day for firefighting efforts. As soon as he had indication, he went straight to the scene, addressed it, and then they started putting hose teams on that.
Thank you for the question, Captain Mark Nispadomi, the commanding officer of Naval Base San Diego. There's about 85 crew members that were living aboard. They've been displaced now, and they're lodging here either at Naval Base San Diego or Naval Base at Point Loma. We've also got wonderful community partner support for any needs, whether it's clothing or basic necessities. But they're on one of our bases right now being taken care of.
To follow up on that, I mean, typically you would suspect that most of the crew would be on, say, Berkeley or another. Can you talk at least a little bit about what the status was of where the crew that would normally be living on the ship, living that on?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear your question.
For maintenance, a lot of crew would have been pulled out when it was in dry dock, and at some point they started moving back in. Were there normal procedures in terms of how many would be coming in based on the maintenance, someone that's still ongoing on the ship?
If I understand your question correctly, is how many, what are we doing with the displaced sailors?
In terms of how many would have been on the ship, if there was still sailors moving back in?
Yeah, the ship was in transition. Where she was in the shipyard availability, they were just getting ready to move back on and establish more of a footprint on the ship. It had over 160 crew members on board at the time, and so they were sort of in a transition point at that place where they were moving stores on and moving their personal stuff, and so again, that's all being kind of held accountable, right, or accounted for right now as far as what's missing and going through all that.
Admiral, as we were talking about, the Bonhomme Richard was close to a long refit to help it make it capable of deploying with F-35 Bravos. Can you talk a little bit about the mission of our amphibious forces and how this changes our maintenance cycle and the deployment cycles for the other amphibs that are, I assume, are going to have to pick up the slack from the Bonhomme Richard being out of commission for the foreseeable future? How does this affect that modernization of deploying the F-35s and Marine expeditionary forces?
I would say that there's no doubt there's an impact, but the way that the optimized kind of development of our readiness of our forces is such that we can fill those gaps, and we have the necessary means to do that through our other ships. As far as what the amphibious force does and what Bonhomme Richard has done as the United States warship, again, it's about full naval integration, and again, it's that land, sea, United States Navy, United States Marine Corps integration is what's critical for our current fight and our future fights. And so, again, not having Bonhomme Richard back at sea as early as we wanted to. Well, we have USS Tripoli, who was just commissioned yesterday. Will be coming soon to San Diego, and will fill in very nicely.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about what we do know about the damage. I know you said over the days that we have fallen masts, floating masts, and superstructure's been damaged. Can you tell us exactly what you do know at this point with the damage?
Well, we do know that fire has gone throughout the ship. And so obviously, as you saw from bow to stern, there was fire. But we do know that basically the main deck and above is where most of the damage was. So that lower V area, and basically we've, again, the investigation will prove exactly what happened, how it happened, and everything else. But I mean, that's kind of where it starts. So the flames and heat goes up, and so that's kind of where we see the damage. And so, again, all that assessment is beginning to take place now that we can actually get into spaces and have temperature and take a look at those things. But that's a long process, each and every space, to ensure that one, just taking apart lagging or or parts of the bulkhead that you need to just make sure there's no embers or no heat behind it that could maybe spark. That whole process has to take place on every inch of that ship.
And I know, like, you had said about that it still has to be decided whether to be repaired, but can you talk a bit about how important it is for the Navy to be able to do what it can to save a big deck ship like this, the significance of it?
Well, every ship is exactly what we want it to be. I mean, that's why it's commissioned. And to answer your question, again, saving this ship is exactly what those sailors needed to do, and that's what exactly they did.
Now that the fire looks like it's out, can you say anything more about what was in that smoke that people were experiencing all over the area? How would a fire on board this vessel be different from, let's say, a big apartment fire that might have burned for a couple of days, or a commercial building? What was in the smoke?
I can kind of turn it over to our environmental.
All right, thanks for the question. Very good question. Compared to something where we look like a house fire, and as the Admiral said, this is a house for many of their personnel. There are other various things that go on in the ship. Installation throughout the ship, padded walls to kind of comfort some for safety, miles of cables and piping throughout the ship as well. So that's a lot of the things you're going to see, along with paint that has been used to paint the ship.
Anything that was particularly germane to a warship that could have been damaged in this and could have caused the smoke?
Well, I mean, the smoke was mainly from, again, it was a Class Alpha fire, so it was ashy, so paper, linens, I mean, mattresses, those kind of things. That's what caused and maintained a lot of the heat. The decking material would also retain some of the heat. And so that's what we saw, a lot of the billowing kind of gray smoke that you saw.
If we go back to Sunday and Monday in the initial fire response, for some of us observers, we saw a lot of fire assets going to the scene, and at some point, several hours they pulled back, including the San Diego Fire Department. Can you talk about who had the lead in those initial hours, and how that command structure kind of worked in terms of who was making a call, whether it would have been, the ship itself, the Navy, the Navy, the fire officials, or some unified federal or civilian command? Can you talk a little about how that was set up initially and how that proceeded and was first created?
I can answer that. We follow Federal Fire San Diego. When we were called, we took the lead under a joint unified command with Ships Forces and San Diego Fire. As you saw us pull back, we are constantly assessing conditions to make sure it's safe to engage in firefighting activities. And so the command structure is the usual ICS system and with a unified command with our partnership.
Can you talk about how would San Diego and the local fire departments have fit into that, and who was making the call in terms of how to fight the fire? Because you're dealing with a Navy ship versus like a builder. So I imagine as a layperson, maybe a little bit different in how you're approaching it.
Right, so Federal Fire, the battalion chief, took the lead. We train with the ships constantly, so we're very familiar with how to fight fire on the ships and how to incorporate ships forces into the incident command system. So they're the SMEs for the ship. They're providing the information that we need for that. As other battalion chiefs roll in, they are assigned a command position within the ICS system.
My question is for Admiral again. Can you describe a little bit about what the procedure is? Once we get all these hotspots headed down, and once you're confident the investigation can begin, who leads that investigation? What's the procedure? And what's the timeline of this investigation?
I'll address the last question first. The timeline is as long as it takes to get the answers that we need. or that we find out, you know, what causes were, everything else. There'll be multiple levels of investigation, both from a safety perspective of ensuring that, again, to get to an earlier question about reassurance that we need to learn from whatever happened and the causes of this fire. And then secondly is, again, you know, the actual cause of the fire and the forensics, if you will, of that fire, and bringing the expertise in there to make sure we understand, you know, again, from the pathway of the fire, all those kind of things, to trace it and figure out, one, can we look differently at structure, shipbuilding, how do we make it safer for a fire like this so it wouldn't get out of control as quick potentially, or you know, what other accelerants, to get to your point, sir, about what is on a Navy ship that's different. You know, maybe we can use different products or different things that would not be as, you know, creating more heat and that kind of stuff. So it really is about, you know, understanding the holistic aspect of this tragic event, but really making it a positive learning experience as we build ships and we put sailors to sea.
Would it be like, which agency is actually in charge of that forensic investigation? Is it like NAVC? Is it CERTFAC? Who's in charge of it?
The safety is the safety center. NAVC will have a component from a standpoint of the ship design, ship element, everything else. And then Commander Pacific Fleet will then have the overall investigation for the command investigation.
So did you say 7th Fleet?
Pacific Fleet.
Oh, Pacific, that's right.
Yeah, I know that we don't know the cause of the actual spark. We, you know, like you said, it seems to have burned the tri-wall boxes. And I was just wondering, what are the possibilities? Can you explain? Like, I know on Sundays a lot of times on the ships there's grinding as well, and there's student work going on. I know you said there's not been work in that, there's not labor work in that specific area. But can you give us some of the possibilities?
I mean, I can't narrow the possibilities. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. And obviously, like you said, any sort of work that had a spark or anything else could cause that. Again, equipment damage, whether it was, you know, wires or, again, there's so many different things that if you have, you know, a lot of oxygen, which we do, a heat source, and then a fuel that will do that, either, you know, a caustic fuel or something that will provide a spark. And the main things that provide sparks is really what would cause this. And so it's really hard to narrow that down. But those are all the kind of ranges that I'm sure will come out.
And lastly, I just wanted to see about, if you could talk about how difficult, for people who don't know ship fires, how difficult it is fighting a fire like this, and can you tell us how long it would take roughly to go through to make sure that nothing's going to burn?
Again, the last part of the question, it is a painstaking evolution of going through the entire ship to make sure there are no hot spots or anything else. Again, the ship is, in this size of a ship, absolutely huge. Plus, it is you know, with debris and everything else in way, you've got to be able to really take your time and safely go through it and go from there. But it's I'm sorry, first part of your question.
Oh, the first part is, why is it so difficult? Can you explain how difficult it is to fight fires on ships?
It's right. One is the pathways for fire because of ventilation, especially the openness on this ship, where it's a large ship and it's built for carrying Marine Corps equipment and Navy equipment, trucks and different armored vehicles. So there's a lot of room, a lot of space for oxygen to live. Plus, you're surrounded or underneath. We have fuel tanks. We have to pump fuel. We have to fuel those trucks. So we have to have the access to the capability. So you're surrounded by that. Plus, when we go to sea and we go on deployment, obviously we have armament and we have weapons that explode when we choose to have them explode. And so all of that kind of combined, plus the confines of putting 1,000, almost 1,100 people on board in that space. So it's close quarters. compartmentalized for watertight integrity, and it's a hard, to navigate and walk straight without picking your feet up everywhere you go, because you want to have watertight integrity. So all of those elements, create, the safety side of it for watertight integrity and survivability is also a detriment to how we can navigate through easily in open spaces. So it's just a very, very tough environment. And then you add a fire. And so think about a fire that would spark at 500 degrees or so, elevate to a temperature of 1,000 degrees. One, if you could even open a door because of the pressure now, because of it has taken all that oxygen out. So basically it just locks that door. It's a steel door, and just being able to open that, you won't be able to do that. So you have to cut through in some cases. As soon as you cut through, you now create oxygen, which is now a pathway for that fire to go the wrong way. And that's the backdraft type of environment. In addition to that, if you can open that hatch and you want to apply agent to it, a solid stream instantly turns to steam at that heat. It's a superheated heat. And so there's zero ability to really combat that fire at that high temperature with water. And so it's a constant, find vulnerabilities in the fire, go attack it, and secure it. And again, the professionals watching this week of the number of firefighters coming and going over, hundreds and hundreds, in and out, 15 minutes at a time, deck by deck, inch by inch of that ship to make sure she was safe. And you're doing that all in the same confines of being concerned about the fuel tanks underneath, the stability of the ship, and all those variables that go into play. And so that's why a shipboard fire is very difficult.
You mentioned fuel tanks, that was about 1 million gallons of fuel in those tanks. Would that be a typical amount that the ship would have in undergoing this period?
It would be for that ship, because they had to start testing their engines and everything else, and that, and for that size of ship, 1 million gallons is not that much fuel. It's a lot of fuel, but it's not that much for that ship.
And just to follow up, I haven't seen anywhere, but how far along was the ship in this maintenance period and started in fall of 2018? Was she near completion of this maintenance period, or still in that?
Right, she was about 2/3 through of all the maintenance she had to get completed before she was finally ready to get back into her basic training phase.
And that would have included some sea trials, obviously, before we.
Exactly, that's why it's about 2/3. I mean, she was almost done most of the maintenance. That's why things were starting to come on board the ship and start putting her back together again in every way.
And would the contractor be part of this investigation?
Again, with partnership with a contractor, absolutely.
And we're going to have time for one more question. Over to you, sir.
So, San Diego Police Patrol mentions picking up traces of benzene. That doesn't sound like linen or things like that. Were there vehicles in the hold that might have had fuel in them that might have added to the fire? Is there anything in there other than just the normal things that you would imagine on a ship that was not in?
I mean, there are obviously shipyard worker equipment, so the JLGs, like extenders and that kind of stuff, were in and around the ship. But to address anything else, I'm not sure.
The only other thing that, along with all the equipment on board, is sometimes some of the paints that are used will have benzene in them as well. So that would be one of the other byproducts for burning.
And can you just explain kind of how we monitor?
Sure, I'll be glad to explain monitoring and what we do and our partnerships for monitoring. The Navy is constantly working with our partners at the Air Pollution Control District and Cal EPA and US EPA. And we have worked as well with our team on board. Our team on board is setting up doing half-hour monitoring for safety of our personnel that are currently fighting the fire on the pier side, looking at things like carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and oxygen levels. However, as you've seen on the APCD's website, They are the ones really documenting the community health concerns that are from the air sampling.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your questions, and have a great day.
Again, thank you everyone for coming. If you have any additional questions, you can still check our Facebook page and Twitter for additional updates. Also, you'll find all of our info there as well. And you're welcome to contact us at our lead operations center up